Why, hello there. The best gardening, to me, if you want to move towards the highest productivity and the lowest maintenance, the way to do that is to really get specific about right plant, right place. Like, take right plant, right place to the furthest extreme you can. Living in the city here, okay, the apocalypse has passed. So what that really means is us really experimenting around when we make with guilds. Guilds are an attempt to make natural plant communities. So instead of just taking bare soil and planting a plant and then trying to bring what it needs to it, you're trying to create the ecosystem that it developed in. It's EEA, it's Environment of Evolutionary Adaptiveness, so that it thrives pretty much on its own with just a few minor tweaks in order to increase productivity. Sometimes we can design a guild starting out and have a good idea that's going to be successful. Other times we have to play around with plants a bit to get them to work. Sometimes what works on one site might not work in another, and really what works in one climate won't work in another. So anyway, let's take a look around at some things and how they work in here, some ideas. So this lovely little plant is miner's lettuce. A lot of people in a lot of climates know it to be weedy. Here it's self-sowed. I didn't sow it here. I would love this to be a major weed in my garden. These little leaves can be used in bulk and salad. They're really a nice green. When I say that, I don't just mean like as a forager. I mean you could sell these to restaurants. They're amazing. Some restaurants are really putting them to good use. I would make salads with this as the main ingredient. But here, it's not really thrived in any of the places that it's supposed to. I've sown it in about a dozen different locations, and it comes and goes throughout the garden, but hasn't really created a good stand yet. See, I'm showing you my mistakes, showing you some mistakes. So this is one I need to play around with more to figure out how to get the habitat exactly right. And this whole guild is one of my favorite guilds. I've got an apricot and a pear in it. You can see there's tons of walking onions, wild garlic, garlic chives, allium unifolium. Marshmallow and valerian are two main things. Over time we had so much valerian I've wanted to tweak that. So I've planted in, instead, skirret in several places, replacing some of the harvested valerian because it's a very similar plant. It grows in a very similar niche. And if the valerian is working well here, I'm hoping the skirret will too. Because I basically can't have too much skirret, and I have more valerian than I need. So that's the kind of tweak that we end up making in this kind of garden. Here's a plant that kind of started this discussion. It's good King Henry. It's another one that in the right habitat in some climates, it can become even pretty weedy. I've heard from people that it's weedy on their sites in the UK. I mean, it's a native species there, so I believe, so, you know, take that as it is. But here, it's never thrived like that. I've tried this in about a dozen locations, too, and haven't quite gotten it right. As you can tell, one of the things about this, some plants adapted in field ecologies and have a lot of resistance to grass. They're naturally allelopathic to grass and actually repel grass. We call those fortress plants, and we can put that use to keep grass out of the garden. To give a view with that, here's comfrey and sorrel have been in this bed, and as you see, it's actually kicked the grass's butt. It has a tendency to be allelopathic to grasses, and sorrels and comfrey, wherever they come in the garden, they actually repel the grasses back and create this little niche habitat. They're in the place where this little fortress area here that has been maintained grass-free by the comfrey. A little interesting seedling there. Cilantro. In fact, there's a bunch of little cilantro seedlings coming in right here. I'll be able to kind of chop and drop mulch around those. There's a salad burnet seedling over there, and this is what fortress plants do. They create niche in the garden. So anyway, I'll need something like that for the good King Henry to thrive, I think, is a place that'll keep the, need to plant it with some plants that are allelopathic to grasses. One of the things, a lot of plants like that thrive in hedgerows because a lot of these woody perennials are pretty allelopathic to grasses, and the fungal dominant soils that end up in them keep grasses out too. And you can see actually the hedgerow here succeeding into the grassland as it would in nature. And the grasses here are very much polyculture with, 4 or 5 species. There's, right now about 10 species actually of plants that are in the lawn in this hedgerow area. Another thing that as this guild has grown shadier, I was hoping would start to replace some of the valerian is the sweet Cicely. Like, this is another one that I could never have too much of. I love it, and I could eat a bunch of it, but it just hadn't really taken off in here until this season. I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it looks like some kind of critter was digging in here. Maybe I was digging in here a little bit too, harvesting some valerian in the fall. And for whatever reason, now there's just like 24 sweet Cicely seedlings taking off in here. So I can chop and drop around those, put little paper bags down over some of the valerian here to kill it. It'll rot in the soil and fertilize the sweet Cicely. It looks like finally I have my sweet Cicely patch getting established. Another shot of what a lot of our lawn ends up looking like under this kind of management. We've never sheet mulched over all the lawn here. I actually think grasses play an important role in ecosystems. Interesting comparison of plants that are allelopathic to grasses, like this sorrel here. Meanwhile, this Cardoon that's selected for the size of the bulbs, it's kind of like something in between an artichoke and a Cardoon. Produces bulbs large enough to eat as an artichoke, and but it would get its butt kicked by grasses. It's much more of a Mediterranean sandy kind of niche plant. It has no adaptive defenses for surviving grass encroachment. I really love strawberries. I've talked about strawberries and strawberry habitat a lot. I was spoiled as a kid to find a few places growing up where there were strawberries just growing in naturally, wild strawberries, big wild strawberry patches. Since I moved in here, it's been one of our big goals to recreate this niche habitat where strawberries were dominant as a plant in them. Right now, it's yet to leaf out, and these strawberries are getting lots of light. And also, there are a lot of strawberries coming out into the grassy area, sending out shoots. So those are going to get a lot more sun. Here's one. So I think this is what happens in this kind of system. I've observed this other places before, where the strawberries really like to have this. So this is home base. This is home base in the area with the niches that are have the grasses shaded out, and then they create a lifeline into the grassy areas, and it's this edge where they're getting lots of sun and they're sharing that back with other plants that they have enough energy to produce a bunch of fruit. Speaking of one of the most useful multi-species high biodiversity systems you can have are hedgerows. This one has this lovely Chojuro Asian pear flowering in it.